Hello and welcome to Chapter 16, Speaking to Persuade. First, we're going to be talking about why persuasion is important. Then we'll talk about the ethics of persuasion, talk about ways to adapt to our audience, the types of persuasive speeches, and then lastly, some organization that will help us in our persuasive speeches. So, why is it important? Let's first define persuasion. Persuasion is the process of creating, reinforcing, or changing people's attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors. There's two parts of this. First, what is the process? It is of either creating a new attitude, belief, or behavior, reinforcing one that they already believe or have, or changing their attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors. So just because someone already agrees with me doesn't mean that my job is done. I can still engage in persuasion. So the second part of this definition is people's attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. So what are the attitudes? Do people have positive or negative attitudes about this? How can I change this or reinforce it? Also, beliefs. What do I believe is true? What do I believe is false? Do I want to reinforce that or do I want to change that or create it? And lastly, behaviors. What are the things that you are doing? What are the things that you are not doing? Should you keep on doing these things? Should you start doing these things? So, with that definition of persuasion in mind, let's talk about some of the things that it will provide you. First, it will give you social capital, meaning that if you are better able to influence other people, then it will allow us to be more effective in our social realities. Also, it will help us inoculate yourself from unethical or fallacious persuasive appeals. So, first of all, it will help us get better at persuading others, but also it will make it so that we are not so easily persuaded by unethical or fallacious persuasive appeals. Speaking of unethical, we talk about the ethics of persuasion. It is very tempting to take ethical shortcuts to achieve your objectives. Some of these ethical shortcuts might be, you know what, I found all of this information that supports my claim, but there is one piece of information that doesn't. You know what? I never saw it. Out of sight, out of mind. I'm just going to stick with this. Or what's even more unethical may be, you know what? I have all this information, but there's one claim that I'm not able to find any information for. So I'm just going to make one up. Let's just make up an expert testimony and just throw it in there. The reason why this is so bad is because, first of all, it is dishonesty, and dishonesty is unethical. Go figure. But also, it could lead someone and guide someone into a perspective that is not aligned with the outside world, and therefore they could go along with that ideology until they eventually run into some serious issues. We as public speakers have to make the ethical choice to not add false information into the narrative, because not only is it unethical, but also it creates a toxic public forum where we will be unable to engage in productive discourse and therefore not be able to get anything done. And it will create divergence from other groups, and we will therefore fall into tribalism. Sounds kind of familiar from where we are right now. Now, never use deliberately false or deceptive claims or name calling. We want to be sure that we're avoiding this. Name calling specifically because what it says in essence is that, you know what, this person should not be listened to because they are less than in some way, and therefore you should listen to me. Obviously, we want to make sure that we have the ability to engage in discourse because that is how we get to the right conclusions. And we can do both. We can be persuasive and ethically sound. So now let's move on to how to persuade our audience. We have to keep in mind the audience's dispositions, their needs, and the relevance to the message. So we start with audience disposition. We probably have talked about this before, but now we're going to go into much further depth and focus more in persuasion. So we start first with social judgment theory. The general idea of this is that the audience has an anchor point or an initial feeling on the topic, as well as ego involvement. Do they either feel very strongly or do they feel not so strongly about this topic? So, when we are able to determine that, we will determine whether or not they have a high latitude of acceptance or a low latitude of acceptance, a high latitude of rejection or a low latitude of rejection. Let's say that I'm trying to persuade my audience that the Earth is round, and the audience, rightfully so, agrees that the Earth is round and feels very strongly about it. Okie doke. Since we are on the same side, then we have we meet on the anchor position. So we agree. Therefore, now we only have acceptance. They're going to accept a lot of what I have to say. But if they care a lot, then they'll have a high latitude of acceptance. If they do not care as much, they may have a low latitude of acceptance, meaning that if some of what I say, they will outright agree with me on. Some of which they probably will not have an opinion. They will just take it in and maybe agree, maybe disagree, but that's where it gets more into the gray area. Whereas if the audience agrees, has very high ego involvement, they will probably agree with the majority of the things that I have to say. Same thing goes for, and vice versa for a negative anchor position. If the audience disagrees with me and says that the Earth is flat and feels very strongly, they would have a very high latitude of rejection. They would reject the majority of what I have to say. And because of that, I would then have to find ways to change my appeal. I may have to find areas of agreement so that we can reduce that latitude of rejection. High latitudes of acceptance mean a receptive audience, high latitudes of rejection mean a hostile audience, and neutral audiences are where there's low latitudes. Next, we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs in discussion of the audience's needs. This helps us in persuasion because we have physiological needs and safety needs. These are our most basic needs. And if they are not met, then we will probably not be persuaded by other needs that are higher on that hierarchy, like self-actualization needs, which involve morality, creativity, spontaneity, problem-solving, lack of prejudice, and acceptance of facts. So let's put this into perspective a little bit. Let's say that a dictatorial person comes up and says, you know what, it is because of this disembodied other, doesn't matter who, they are the cause of all of our problems. That you don't have a job, that you don't have work, that you're not safe, you're not able to put food on the table, you're not able to put water on the table, things like that. Well, then you wouldn't put water on the table, you would put it on a glass on the table. But because of this, and if you agree, and I've persuaded you of that, and you have fear of this disembodied other, therefore your physiological and safety needs are called into question, then you would probably not be persuaded by the other persuasive appeals, esteem or self-actualization needs. So if someone were to try to persuade me that someone who believes that has a lot of fear for this disembodied other, aka does not satisfy the safety and physiological needs, as a result, they would not be persuaded by me saying that those things are false, that is prejudiced, that is not moral. because their physiological and safety needs are called into question. So we have to meet the audience where their needs are. And lastly, we have audience relevance. This is how relevant the message is to the audience. This involves topic selection, but if you choose a topic that may not appear on its face to be relevant to the audience, you want to prove that it is relevant to the audience. So, because listeners can accept information in one of two ways, through central processing or peripheral processing. If the audience feels like this is very relevant to them, they will be motivated by personal involvement, they will critically think, they will question, they will consider. Whereas with peripheral processing, where they do not feel like this information is relevant to them, they may dismiss information and base their decisions on very peripheral information. So let's put this into perspective. Let's say that we are voting. So what do I do? At that point, I say, if I believe that voting is important, that it is relevant to me, then I would critical think and question and consider all of the candidates to get the best decision. Whereas if I engage in peripheral processing, or I don't care, I don't think that my vote matters, then I would probably make my decision based off of peripheral information. Like, you know what, that guy looks smart. That guy seems like someone I'd like to have a beer with. Sorry, guy or girl. Not last rhetorical thought. What are some persuasive appeals that create guilt for us? Because the guilt redemption cycle is something that is very impactful in regards to persuasion, because we tend to feel guilty and that motivates us to do things. Let's take an example. Oh, sorry. First, we feel guilty. Then we purify that guilt by either mortifying or hurting ourselves, or victimizing or blaming someone else. And if we do one of those two things, then we will feel redeemed. And then we can feel guilty all over again. The general idea is that we all have hierarchies in our lives, areas where we want to exceed and excel. We want to exceed and excel in academics. We want to exceed and excel in health. We want to exceed and excel in relationships. We want to exceed and excel in family situations. And because we are human, we will inevitably have a failure in one of these things. And we will, depending on how much we care about it, we will feel guilty about it. So we have to purify ourselves by mortifying ourselves. This means, and this happens naturally. For example, if me and my sister, we get into a fight. And it is real bad, and you know what? I feel incredibly guilty about it because that doesn't meet where I expect myself to be in regards to family. So, how can I redeem this? I can either mortify myself. I could go up to my sister and engage with her and say, you know what? I apologize. I didn't mean to do these things. I was in the wrong for these reasons. I do apologize. That would be mortifying because I don't want to do that. That sounds like a horrible thing, and it would put me in an emotional state. So maybe I don't want to do that. I may instead engage in victimage. I would blame my sister for making this argument. You know what? It's because she brought it up, and because of this and that, and she's bad at talking or conflict, and because of that, I feel like she's the one to blame. Therefore, I am the helpless victim in this situation, so I feel redeemed by that. Obviously, in a lot of these situations, mortification can be good. But victimage also has its points. And this goes outside of just personal situations. A good example of this is global climate change. We should feel guilty because we are causing it. Fantastic. So, how do we mortify? By maybe driving less than we usually do, maybe taking public transport, maybe eating chicken instead of beef, or trying to be vegan and reducing our carbon footprint. All of those, from my own personal perspective, sound pretty awful. It would be hurting myself to do those things. Or I could engage in victimage. I could blame and try to hopefully vote out people who go against reforms in this area. And therefore, I would feel redeemed by that. So, by engaging and making the audience feel guilty, we can potentially change the way that they are addressing certain situations. There are three types of persuasive appeals: propositions of fact, value, and policy. We start with propositions of fact. Questions of fact talk to the truth or falsity of an assertion. The earth is flat. The earth is not flat. Global warming is happening. Global warming isn't happening. Evolution did happen. Evolution didn't happen. Oh, vaccines cause autism? Vaccines obviously don't cause autism. But when analyzing these questions of fact, they are similar to informative speeches, but are presenting a subjective view of the facts. They are presenting evidence and then proving as to why those facts lead to this outcome. In other words, there is reason behind this. And draw a conclusion from known facts. So the facts have to be highly credible in regards to this situation. With this sort of organizational speech, you would probably want to engage in a topical organizational pattern, focusing in three different things of how this naturally breaks down. We are not going to be doing this type of speech for our persuasive speeches. We also have persuasive speeches on questions of value. Questions of value is a question of the worth, rightness, morality, or idea or of an idea or action. So, by analyzing questions of value, this is justifying your claim of what has value without inserting an opinion. This is very important in regard to this one as well. Because as soon as I insert my own opinion, then it shows that there is so much subjectivity there that you cannot take me seriously. Again, why is it that we use support? Because support is outside of our perspective, and therefore it's more highly credible. It's more credible than my opinions on it. So if I were to try to persuade that Xbox Series X is going to be better than PlayStation 5, that would be a proposition of value. Or Coke is better than Pepsi. Or Windows is better than Apple. All of which would be propositions of value, and I would not assert an opinion. I would instead talk to what are some of the reasons as to why it is better. I'd find examples, statistics, and testimony. And then lastly, we have propositions of policy, and this is the one that we're doing for our persuasive speeches. This would be a question of whether a specific course of action should or should not be taken. There are two types of this: speeches to gain passive agreement. So, in other words, just improve commitment without any sort of action. This may be if no action is able to be taken at this time, which there are a lot of those sorts of things. Or speeches to gain an immediate action. This breeds commitment to the cause if it is successful, and will make the audience engage in a specific action immediately. Speeches of passive agreement would probably be something like, hey, vote for Biden, vote for Trump, vote for whoever. That would be trying to strengthen commitment, so that when eventually there is a vote, that you would then vote. Whereas breeding actual commitment, maybe you need to stop smoking, you need to stop texting and driving, you need to stop, you should never buy from pet stores, stuff like that. So, analyzing questions of policy involves need. Convincing the problem is serious enough that it needs to be changed, so consciousness raising. Also, have a plan and illustrate the key parts of your plan of how you're going to solve this or what they should do. And then lastly, the practicality. Show why your plan will solve it and why it's advantageous. This is why the problem cause solution organization is the type of organization that we're going to be engaging in, because it shows the practicality and proposes a plan to solve this problem. When addressing any persuasive speech, in the subpoints and the sub-subpoints, aka that support, you are going to be using the Toulmin model, but this is going to look very similar to what we've already talked about with logos. We will have claims, grounds, and warrants. Claims are the position being argued. Let's say that I think that all dogs are awesome. All dogs are amazing. Then my grounds for that would be that I have had 3 dogs, and all of which have been amazing. So, because I've argued that all dogs are amazing, and I have had 3 dogs, and all of which were amazing, then what would be my warrant, my principal provision or chain of reason that connects those grounds to the claims? That those 3 dogs that I've had are representative of all dogs. And if you disagree with that, then I would then have to prove that warrant. And that warrant would then be my new claim, that these 3 dogs are representative of all dogs. So how would I be able to do that? I have no idea. Maybe I could possibly have lay testimony from a person who has witnessed my 3 dogs. Or maybe I could talk to expert testimony that all dogs are more or less the same, although they are not. They are all unique little snowflakes, and I love them all. Anyway, now we talk about organizing our speeches for questions of policy. There are 3 ways to do it. There is the direct method pattern. And this is the first reason, the second reason, the third reason. This one is awful. Do not do it, because it doesn't really provide anything outside of the structured organization of clumping up information. We also have the problem-solution order. This is to demonstrate the need for a policy by showing the seriousness of a problem, and then showing how your plan is the most practical to solve it. That is good, but what's better is the problem-cause-solution order. And this is identifying a problem, analyzing the causes of that problem. The reason why this is so valuable is because it is saying that here are problems that need to be fixed. This raises it on the consciousness of the audience and also shows that there is a need to handle this right now, provides exigence. Then the causes show why those problems are happening. And because of that, then it is saying that once these causes are solved, then this problem will go away. Then here comes the solution. The solution is connected to the causes, and therefore the solution resolves the causes and therefore the problem. All of this is logical, all of this is connected, and therefore all of it is supportive and supported. So there are also some others. There's the comparative advantage order. When the audience already understands that there's a problem, you would have to talk about the opposition solution, your solution, and then compare why yours is better than the other. And then there is the refutation style. This one's a little bit more interesting. It's signaling the argument to which you are responding, stating your argument, providing the justification of your side, and then summarizing your response. So you would say, here's this person's argument, here's why and then here's my argument. Very simple, but this is very much found within debate. And then we also talk to a last persuasive appeal. This one is slightly more interesting because we don't usually see this one in persuasive appeals in regards to persuasive speeches, but we see this quite a bit in advertisements. So we have attention, need, satisfaction, visualization, and action. We start with attention. This grabs the audience's attention. Then the need shows that there's some sort of need that needs to be changed. There needs to be a change. Then, how do I satisfy that need? Then, the visualization where it gets a little bit more ambiguous. The visualization is intensifying the desire for this policy by visualizing the benefits of it. In other words, seeing yourself experiencing these benefits. And then lastly, action. Conclude with a call to action of some kind. Go buy this product. So let's see if we can spot Monroe's motivated sequence within this video.
Hello, ladies. Look at your man. Now back to me. Now back at your man. Now back to me. Sadly, he isn't me. But if he stopped using lady-scented body wash and switched to Old Spice, he could smell like he's me. Look down. Back up. Where are you? You're on a boat with the man your man could smell like. What's in your hand? Back at me. I have it. It's an oyster with 2 tickets to that thing you love. Look again. The tickets are now diamonds. Anything is possible when your man smells like Old Spice and not a lady. I'm on a horse.
So, how does he grab the audience's attention? Well, look down, back up. Where are you? You're on a boat. Excellent. So, just the fact that things are changing all in and out, plus, shirtless, ripped guy, that kind of works too, grabs the audience's attention. Then we have need. What is the need that Old Spice will inevitably satisfy? It is not that we are not on a boat. It is not that we are somehow, well, it actually talks to how we are deficient in that men are wearing lady-scented body wash. Men smelling like ladies? My fragile masculinity. So therefore, what do I then have to do? How do I satisfy this need? I buy man-scented body wash, Old Spice. So therefore, now I've found the need, I've satisfied that need. Now the visualization is where this happens. Where do the guys see themselves in this ad? Probably being that guy, super cool and hip and awesome, and the ladies probably may visualize themselves as that being the man your man could smell like. So you would be with that guy. Again, this is where it talks in more abstract terms, but we are visualizing the benefits of being like that person who uses Old Spice. And then lastly, the call to action, very simple. Go buy Old Spice. So now we jump back to the problem cause solution order. The reason why we're discussing this is because this is the one that we are going to be engaging in. So the problem, so the introduction and conclusion will have all the same components, except that the conclusion will end with a call to action. The call to action should not be so much that it is impossible to achieve, but not so little that it doesn't solve the problem at all. Good example of this is global climate change. If I I'm probably not going to persuade you to go out and buy a $40,000-$50,000 electric car. However, I may be able to persuade you to not eat beef for 4 out of the 7 days of the week, and therefore that would be a better thing to do, but not so little like recycling whenever you feel like it. That probably wouldn't be enough of a call to action. But I digress. We're talking about the problem cause solution order. The problem includes any definitions or includes clear definitions of any terms that need to be clarified. Also provides history, impact, and reasons of why this is a problem. So any of these could be potential subpoints for your main point of the problem. Or what you could also do is that your problem, a good way to think about this is that what are some of the problems that have been that are a result of your solution not being implemented? What are the negative effects that are going around that are so problematic that your solution would inevitably solve? Then we jump into causes. Just detail why the problem even exists. Why is this problem even here? Who created the problem? What happened to create this problem? And how did this whole thing even occur? So it is proposing causes, or you could even talk about what are some of the reasons why your solution is not being implemented? What are some of the causes of that? And then lastly, propose your certain solution. Fully describe what this solution would be, determine what the listeners would have to do to be a part of the solution, and list all the things that need to be accomplished to achieve this solution. Again, these little bullet points could potentially be your subpoints for your persuasive speech. And you could even talk about what are some of the benefits of this solution? What will I gain from it? So we are going to watch a great persuasive speech here that has a problem, cause, solution organization. Let's jump right in.
On a chilly November night 2 years ago, a Ford Explorer was charging down a California highway. The 16-year-old driver and 3 of his friends were returning from a concert in Los Angeles. These young people were good students, gifted athletes, talented artists and musicians, and none were drunk or impaired by drugs. They were, however, driving too fast, and the driver lost control of the car. The car went into a ditch and hit a tree. The driver and 1 passenger were killed. The other 2 passengers escaped with severe injuries. One of these passengers was my nephew. Today he is finishing high school in a wheelchair he will occupy for the rest of his life. Unfortunately, tragic auto accidents involving teenage drivers are much too common in all parts of the United States. After researching the subject for my speech, I have come to the same conclusion as the experts, that the best way to prevent such accidents is to raise the age for full driving privileges to 18 or older. I know from my audience analysis questionnaire that most of you oppose such a plan. But I also know from my questionnaire that most of you recognize that 16 and 17-year-old drivers are less skilled and less responsible than older drivers. So I ask you to listen with an open mind while we discuss some of the problems associated with teenage driving, some of the major causes of the problems, and a plan that will go a long way towards solving some of the problems.
So, great. This was the entire introduction. She built her credibility by talking about how her nephew was involved in a situation like this, and she also engaged in identification and audience relevance, thereby building her credibility. She talked about how she had submitted a questionnaire to the audience, and because of that, she was able to tell that most people disagreed with her, but people agreed with her in certain ways, and she's going to use that to propose her argument. So, highly developed persuasive appeal. Let's keep on going. Or highly developed introduction, I mean.
No matter how one looks at the evidence, it all leads to one fact. There are too many motor vehicle accidents, deaths, and injuries involving teenage drivers. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, while teenagers make up 7% of the nation's licensed drivers, they represent 14% of all motor vehicle fatalities. The NHTSA reports that last year, 3,657 drivers aged 16 to 20 were killed in automobile accidents. In addition to killing the drivers, these same accidents took the lives of 2,384 teenage passengers. But these accidents didn't affect teenagers alone. They also took the lives of 2,625 people aged 21 or older. So the total number of people killed last year in automobile accidents involving teenage drivers was 8,666, almost exactly the number of full-time students at this campus. Evidence also shows that the younger the driver, the greater the risk. According to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, 16-year-olds have the highest percentage of crashes involving speeding, the highest percentage of single vehicle crashes, and the highest percentage of crashes involving driver error. Moreover, as USA Today reports, 16-year-olds are 3 times more likely to be involved in fatal crashes than our older drivers. Now that we've seen the extent of the problem, we can explore its causes.
First of all, great transition. Also, why did she add up all those numbers of the people who have died in these vehicle accidents with underage drivers and then compare it to people at this university? She put that number in perspective, and as a result, this ethereal number that we can't really wrap our heads around, 8,666 people, is put into perspective of people at this school.
One of the causes is inexperience. New drivers just haven't had enough time on the road to develop their driving skills. But inexperience is far from the only cause of the problem. After all, there will always be inexperienced drivers, even if the driving age is raised to 21 or even to 25. A second cause is revealed by brain research. Findings from the National Institute of Mental Health show that the brain of an average 16-year-old has not developed to the point where he or she is able to effectively judge the risk of a given situation. Dr. Jay Geed, who led the research team that conducted the study, states, when a smart, talented, very mature teen does something that a parent might call stupid, it's this underdeveloped part of the brain that has most likely failed. Stephen Lowenstein, a medical professor at the University of Colorado, has just finished a 5-year study comparing the traffic records of 16-year-old drivers to drivers aged 25 to 49. His conclusion? Deliberate risk-taking and dangerous and aggressive driving behaviors predominated among the 16-year-olds. A third cause of motor vehicle fatalities among teenage drivers is night driving. According to the Washington Post, when 16-year-olds get behind the wheel of a car after dark, the likelihood of having an accident increases several times over. Of course, nighttime driving is less safe for everyone, but it becomes particularly dangerous when combined with a young driver's inexperience and reduced ability to gauge risk. Finally, there is the presence of teenage passengers in the car. We all know what it's like to drive with our friends. The stereo's up loud, cell phones are ringing, everybody's laughing and having a good time. The problem is that all these factors create distractions. Distractions that too often result in accidents, injury, and death. Alan Williams, chief scientist at the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, reports that one teenage passenger doubles the risk of a fatal crash. With 2 or more passengers, the risk is 5 times greater. Remember my nephew's accident I mentioned at the start of my speech? There were 3 passengers in the car. So the extent of the problem is clear. So too are its causes. What steps can we take to help bring about a solution?
She just transitioned from her cause to her solution. So let's talk about the cause. The reason why this is so impactful is because she is providing causes that are very reasonable. And she doesn't diminish, she doesn't put down people who engage in these causes, but she just says that they are causes and then backs them up with very good research. One of her points are that teenage drivers do not have enough development in the brain. That is an incredible claim and not easily believed if not for the evidence that she provides. So she has to provide solid grounds for that there was this 5-year study done that it's this underdeveloped part of the brain that leads to what teens doing what some people may call stupid. So it's because of the quality of her support, her grounds, that leads to her providing support for her claim.
First, we need a national policy that no one can receive a learner's permit until age 16, and no one can receive full driving privileges until age 18. This will allow 16-year-olds time to gain driving experience before having an unrestricted license and to reach a stage of brain development where they are better able to handle the risk and responsibility of driving. Second, we need to restrict nighttime driving so as to keep younger drivers off the road when conditions are riskiest. Some states have tried to address this problem by banning teenagers from driving after midnight or 1 a.m. But as the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety reports, these laws don't go far enough. According to the Institute, we need a 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. limit until drivers reach the age of 18. Third, we need to restrict the number of teenage passengers in cars driven by younger drivers. In fact, says Kevin Quinlan from the National Transportation Safety Board, passenger restriction is the first and foremost measure you can take to reduce teenage driving fatalities. According to Quinlan, the optimal policy would be to bar drivers age 17 or younger from having any passengers in the car unless the riders are adults or family members. Drivers from the age of 17 to 18 should not be allowed to carry more than 1 teenage passenger. Now, I know all of this might sound harsh and perhaps inconvenient, but the evidence is clear that it would save a significant number of lives.
So she has more or less wrapped up her solutions. And keep in mind that a lot of times people tend to fall into the trap of, this is my policy, this is what I propose, and then don't really back up why that would solve a lot of these problems. Also, that it is far better to choose an existing solution that an expert has provided. That way, it improves the credibility of the argument altogether and therefore improves your credibility as well. So, highly valuable. And she is now persuading she's arguing against some of the potential arguments that could come from this solution.
If you want to discuss harsh, Said one father whose 17-year-old son died in an accident 3 years ago. I can talk to you about harsh. It's being awakened at 2:30 in the morning by the State Patrol, telling you that your son has just been killed. Everyone in this room has lived to college age. But this year alone, thousands of teenage drivers will not live that long. And they won't live that long due to factors that we can prevent. There's no way to solve all the problems we encounter on the road. But we can do something to help save the lives of younger drivers and make the roads safer for all of us. As I said earlier, this might sound harsh or inconvenient, but I know my nephew would gladly trade both for the chance to walk again.
And then she ties back to the attention grabber, or ties back to her credibility. So, thereby creating bookends and ending on a very high note. So, very, very well done persuasive speech due to the organization, as well as to the support that she provided, as well as the verbal citation showing that this was coming from credible sources. And just overall, not to mention that she had the logos, she also added some pathos, emotion, by showing that even though this is harsh and inconvenient, my nephew, who is in a wheelchair now, would gladly trade both. Same thing with the person who was awakened at midnight about how their son could potentially have died. So, with that, that is all. Have a great rest of your day. I will see you next time.